guests on Sudan. We are we are committed to some kind of action plan and a statement and making our influence felt in whatever way we can leverage it. So this is a priority for us, and we're giving much of the second hour to this discussion. Thank you. Sadia, can you introduce Nimat, or Nimat, do you want to
I will just go ahead. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I just want to give a brief introduction, and then Nimat can add through her, I guess, discussion, anything else that I left out. Nimat Ahmadi is the founder and the president of Darfur Women Action Group. She has been holding conferences many years and has been on the issue of Sudan, not only Darfur, but Sudan. She has also have been holding conferences, which I participated in, and I just realized Amira is one of the board members of Darfur Women Action Group. So I will let Naimat go ahead and add anything else that she would like to share with everyone. And then, of course, I hope she will have an opportunity to co-present with the Sudan group. Thank you, Bonnie.
Very well. Please, Nimat, we're sorry to squeeze you into such a small amount of time, but please.
No, that's totally fine. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to thank AdNA Ubuntu Group for your dedication to this work. I think it is very important, since like usually issues in Africa doesn't make enough headlines for the US policymakers. It's really important. And thank you, Sadia, for that introduction. I'm really sad to see that many of you that I have met years ago, that we are still coming back and working in Sudan, and things hasn't changed much, as you can see, and you are all aware of the recent development in Sudan. The current situation is that even though there has been a ceasefire, but still the bombing and shelling continue in Khartoum. Attacks in Darfur, across the Darfur region, has intensified. Unfortunately, it has not just recently intensified as the war erupted in Sudan in general, but it has escalated sharply after the coup, as many of you familiar with the militias of Janjaweed and the Rapid Support Forces, who have been all over Darfur, but they are also expanded to Sudan, as their leader is being promoted to be in the deputy or the vice president of the country. So there has been systematic but intensified attack in West Darfur. Unfortunately, this past week, 200 people were killed in Al Junaina, West Darfur. This is in one city. They bombed hospitals, they burned homes and government institutions. These numbers are increasing because people are scattered and frantic. Some fled to Chad. There has been a report of 20,000 people fled to Chad, but the numbers are many more from Al Junaina and the surrounding area, because nobody is coming together to report on how many people are missing. Their dead bodies are still on the streets. People are unable to, but also are able to bury their relative, but there is no water in the city. Some of them water sources have been poisoned, and the market was completely burned. So right now, Al Junaina is in a very critical situation and continued and expected to worsen, as there is no humanitarian organization on the ground as of now, completely cut off with the security situation. The UN has evacuated its staff, other international organization has left, and people are left on their own. Within other Darfur area in Niyala, there has been fighting between the Rapid Support Forces and the government. They looted NGOs, government institutions, and they burned several government institutions. In Al-Fashir, the same thing in North Darfur State. The same incident. Unfortunately, the internet and the phone lines has been cut. So there are many, right now, the information we are receiving, it's about like 15 to 20% of the Darfur regions area, but most areas are cut and they do not have access to internet or phones. So we don't know exactly the number of casualties, the situation for the innocent people across these cities. At the national level, the government, even though they declare a ceasefire, as of last night, they were bombing. They bombed hospital in Sharganil area, which and killed like several civilians. And they continue to bomb in various areas of Khartoum, Omdurman, and Eastern Nile, where is the third city in Khartoum state. And with the international evacuating their staff. So many people start to flee. There are some places relatively safe in other side of Sudan, like central Sudan areas and eastern Sudan. So many people have been moving to these areas, but also there is a declaration of emergency in Al Jazeera because of limited resources and the number of people coming from Khartoum overflowing the city, living in the schools and public areas, but also people have been taking people into their homes. So the situation continued to expected to be worsening. There are people who fled to Egypt. They were stuck in the Egyptian border. Unfortunately, they have not been allowed to come in. There is no water, shelter, or any kind of resources to sustain these people. So we are urging the humanitarian or organization working with refugees to go to the border and try to provide humanitarian assistance. So it is like kind of the situation is very critical, but then the incident happened within Khartoum is the direct casualty of civilians as a result of government attacking building and also the rapid support forces attacks as well. But in Darfur, the nature is very systematic, especially in the case of Al Janeina. They go house to house looking for indigenous African people in their homes, and this is part and parcel of the long-standing attacks, genocidal attacks in Darfur. So that, like, unfortunately, the situation. So for many people, their life is being threatened within this context. So even the homes and the areas that have been systematically targeted for the indigenous African people who were singled out to be killed. As of the effort, there have been many working groups that are working. What we are asking for is there are several women groups on the ground that I'm a part of. There is a Sudanese women group against war. There is a Darfuri Women Voices, because many, when the media focus in Khartoum, many places in Darfur has gone underreported or not reported. Trying to get information out, also expecting in the coming days, even with the ceasefire, they will be targeting and crack down on human rights defenders, people who have been documenting and reporting this. We're also trying to find arrangements. People took initiative in many cities in Al-Fashir, local government, traditional leaders, they came together and forced these two sides to open spaces for hospital, whereby people can provide assistance. Right now, youth and young people step in to provide blood because the blood banks were running out of blood and many other medical supply. There is only one hospital in Al-Fashir, so we're trying to get emergency support, like either like money or any kind of support so that they can buy more supplies. The same thing in initiative in South and Central Darfur, also local government, civil society and other local groups, they came in between the fighting groups and they urged them to allow humanitarian assistance to reopen the cities, but there is no guarantee because the rapid support force are going in and out. And then also the military are shooting irresponsibly, including bombing places inhabited by citizens, civilians and hospitals. So I stop here. I may come back again in terms of what actions and what areas that AdNA can be effective in helping out. So unfortunately, I have to drop out, but I will come back and will be able to answer your questions and also share with you our effort and other people's effort that we can support.
Thank you, Nimat. I hope we haven't held you back. You had to go to another interview at exactly this hour, but thank you for getting us started. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sadia,
most welcome. We'll come back, definitely.
We hope that you can rejoin after you have shared with others. I see that the two special other guests from Sudan were nodding and agreeing with some of the points that Nimat was making. We welcome you both. Muiza, will you please introduce our guests before we go into more discussion of Sudan? You're muted, Muiza. There you go.
Is it on mute now?
Yes, it's we can hear you. Oh, I think you accidentally muted yourself. We could hear you. There you go.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my computer's acting up. I just want to quickly introduce two special guests. We have Dr. Dimah Mahmoud, who's a Pan-Africanist and an Actionist. And also with us is Samah Salman. She is a Sudan analyst and also president of the US Sudanese educated. Let me get that full. You can explain who it is.
Okay.
US Educated Sudanese Association. And I'll let them take it from here. We had them on the show last week, a very excellent discussion that we had about Sudan. I'll send a link as well. I think I sent it on the WhatsApp group, but they can talk to us further about what needs to be done and also the updates that we need to know about.
Welcome to both of you. I don't know which one of you spoke first on the radio show. Maybe we will follow that order just to be consistent. Do you remember?
I don't remember what happened an hour ago, to be honest.
I think it was Samah, I think started.
Okay, Samah, will you take the lead and then we'll hear from Dr. Mahmoud. Thank you very much. Please proceed. Welcome.
Sure, thank you so much. My name is Samah Salman. Muiza was gracious enough to have myself and my sister Dimah on his show last week, and we had an excellent platform. We spoke at length about the Sudan war that's currently raging and ravaging Sudan. I'm also present, so I come from the private sector in Sudan, so I mostly do a lot of project development, but I also lead an organization called US Educated Sudanese Association, which is basically a diaspora association of Sudanese who, I mean, the organizing principle was those Sudanese who have been educated abroad in the US and have came back to Sudan, which is where I was based at the time, before relocating back to the US. My sister Nimat, who I've known now for a few months, and who we actually have a very close relationship and very close working relationship. She did an excellent job of explaining some of the causes of the current violence and the actual conditions, the horrible conditions that are a consequence and a result of the violence. Nimat is also she went in depth in laying sort of the landscape for what's going on in Darfur, and I think what I can do is try to connect it back to the war that started on April 15th. And so Sudan as a nation, since its independence, has been at war with itself for almost 65 out of 67 of its years. And Sudan is also one of the nations, the country in Africa with the greatest number of military coups d'etats. So that tells you about the militarism and the politicization of the military in Sudan, and how power is concentrated in a very strong state central military, and how that creates sort of lays the foundation for this kind of a war and all of the wars that have been taking place in Sudan because of that concentration of power in the military, and also because of how political parties utilize the military to take over power in Sudan. So April 15th, two generals started fighting. General Burhan, who is the commander of the Sudanese armed forces, and General Hemeti, who is the commander of a paramilitary militia called the Rapid Support Forces. And there are all sorts of reports about how this started. There's a report that there's a third hidden sort of invisible party, which is the old guard of Omar al-Bashir. I'm sure everybody knows and remembers Omar al-Bashir. He ruled Sudan with an iron fist for 30 years and was unseated by the revolution, the People's Revolution, our revolution of 2018 and 2019. So he has had underground militias and underground cells that have come to the surface also, and have sided with the Sudanese armed forces and with General al-Burhan. And so there are reports that they triggered the first shots against the RSF. Now, the catalyst for all of this is the fact that there's been a buildup of tension between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces for many, many years now. And that tension came to a very high pitch over the past 6 months or so because of a framework agreement that's being negotiated. This framework agreement is an agreement that has brought all of the different political parties in Sudan, as well as Burhan, General Burhan of the military, and General Hemeti of the RSF, to negotiate agreement that would effectively hand power back over to civilian democratic rule. Now, you may be asking, you may be thinking this is a little bit confusing. There was a revolution, what happened? So there was a democratic transitional government that was leading Sudan as a result of the revolution that unseated Omar al-Bashir. That democratic government was led by two sort of institutions. One was the Sovereign Council, which acted as the presidency, and the head of the Sovereign Council was General Burhan, and his vice president was General Hemeti, and it was a joint shared council between military and civilians. And then you have the prime minister, who leads his cabinet, Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, and he effectively was the prime minister leading Sudan through the period of the democratic transition, which was supposed to end in elections, democratic elections for Sudan. So that democratic transitional period lasted for 2.5 years until October 2021, when General Burhan and General Hemeti carried out a coup that unseated Prime Minister Hamdok. So they took power, and they had been fully in power since October 2021, about 1.5 years ago. There is a framework agreement that's being negotiated as of December 2022, almost a year later, to say there is too much civil unrest in Sudan. Protests against the coup are taking place 2-3 times a week, sometimes almost daily. Too many lives are being lost. Sudan doesn't have a functioning government. A prime minister hasn't been appointed since the generals have taken power. The state is in paralysis. So the UN chief Volker Perthes, who is the head of the mission in Sudan, along with many international entities, the Quad, the Triad, different representatives of the international community, the AU, IGAD, came together and negotiated this framework agreement that says Burhan and Hemeti to transfer power to the civilians, and they go back to leading their military and paramilitary institutions. Now, there's a clause in there that says that the paramilitary forces of General Hemeti, who is the deputy of Burhan, should be fully integrated into the regular army of General Burhan. Hemeti, who has accumulated a huge economic and political empire, didn't like that. And the tension has always been there. He said he'd do that, but in 10 years. He'd do it on his own sweet time. Burhan is saying it needs to be done in about 2 years. And that tension, those clashes started before the war. The old guard of Omar al-Bashir has also been looking to come back into power. And they saw this tension and as an opportunity that they could take advantage of. And they also saw that the civilian opposition, what they see as an opposition, to be sufficiently weakened over time since the coup, with fragments and splits, that they felt confident enough to come above the surface and have their militias start fighting. So the fighting breaks out. To date, we have mass destruction of Sudanese installments, Sudanese infrastructure, huge loss of lives, as Ni'mat already described. To date, I mean, the numbers, officially recorded numbers are about 600, 700 lives lost, but unofficial numbers are much larger because, I mean, anecdotally, there are bodies strewn all over Khartoum. So nobody has a real official count, a real full count yet. Injuries are basically at this stage estimated to be about 1,000, but unofficial counts are putting it at much higher. I mean, the loss of life, the humanitarian crisis right now that Sudan faces, the lack of medicine, lack of food, like electricity shortages, internet outages, lack of access to basic sanitation, because the whole country is being bombed, the whole country is being looted, the whole country is in a state of chaos at the moment. So that's where we are. We're seeking the support of the African neighbors, IGAD, the African Union, UN, US, EU, for help in terms of emergency humanitarian assistance, in terms of a political and diplomatic solution that would lead to a sustained ceasefire, a sustained cessation of hostilities. But up to this point, none of the ceasefires that have been agreed to have actually been honored. And so we have a situation where Sudanese are fleeing from the capital to areas, to states on the borders of Sudan, as well as crossing into Ethiopia, Chad, Egypt, and South Sudanese repatriating back to South Sudan. And that number, I mean, we're talking about 30, 40, 50,000 to Chad. Ethiopia, we don't really have a sense of the numbers yet, but it's in the tens of thousands. South Sudan at this stage could be 60, 70,000. And the border to Egypt, we don't know, but it's also in the tens of thousands. So I'll let Dr. Dimah take it from here. And thank you so much for this platform.
Thank
And
you.
if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. I know it's a very complicated, complex situation. So what might seem obvious to me may not seem to someone who is not Sudanese.
But thank you, Samah. That was exactly 10 minutes, perfect. And it did clarify a very complex situation with crystal clear explanation. So we really appreciate that service that you've provided to us. Please, we look forward to hearing from Dr. Mahmoud.
Askagro, I greet and bless you in my Nubian ancestors' tongue, and I give thanks to both my sisters for holding space and echoing the cruel, but also very inevitable reality that we as Sudanese people are experiencing. I want to thank you all for yielding your space, for your continued effort, for your solidarity, and for calling in Sudanese people to ask them how best to show up. This is massive. So thank you. How to concisely put a different lens to it, I will start from the angle of language. The hashtag most of you have been seeing around is Keep Eyes on Sudan. And I want to start by reminding everyone that when we say Sudan, we don't mean the geographic mass that is the land of Sudan. We mean the people of Sudan as well. And I've been in complete awe as we see us do everything, literally everything, that screams in the face of the hypocrisy, the double standards, and the contradictions of this international system. And I say system and not community. And we have to be a lot more intentional with our words. A few things. I really appreciate my sister Nemat using and utilizing the word genocidal in reference to what is happening on the ground, because there seems to be some case of deliberate and convenient amnesia of when to ring and use that word. And here it's important to invoke that the first government to use this word is the US government. And so it has a responsibility to act accordingly. We continue to hear the US over and over and over again, we do not negotiate with terrorists, yet this is exactly what has been happening. Negotiating with Hemeti is negotiating with terrorists, genocidal terrorists at that. So we cannot sit here and pretend that you are trying to hear or you are trying to deliver any form of justice to any person in Sudan when you continue to blatantly go against your own policies. As people continue to say, no more military rule, as people continue to say, no to Hemeti, as people continue to say, no genocidal terrorists, as people continue to say, justice for our martyrs, justice for Darfur. These contradictions must be eradicated, and to be eradicated, we need to all be very, very, very comfortable with getting uncomfortable with confronting the realities on the ground when there is an international outcry for Ukraine and an international blind eye for Sudan. If that does not scream of systemic racism, I don't know what does. So I have been watching our people. I have stopped watching and waiting for others to step up, for others to show up. And that's not to say that some are not. But the truth is, everything is being confused and convoluted in an ocean of misinformation. The deliberate attempts to frame what's clearly started as two warring genocidal factions is being framed as civil war. And civil war is a carte blanche for this international arena to not act. It is what they continue to call one of Africa's longest civil wars between the government and South Sudan, so that they do not act. The actions did not start coming up until clear resources started pointing to 80% of Sudan's oil being in South Sudan. That is what prompted action. And unfortunately, currently we're seeing it being repeated again, because now the world will have to reckon with what's happening in Sudan, because Coca-Cola is panicking because it's running out of gum arabica for its Coke, and it's coming out of Sudan. So now, for the bubbles, people have to pay attention. We have a lot to learn as Sudanese, and this is an opportunity for all of us to learn as people of African ancestry, and anyone interested in the human conditioning and the advancement of holistic and collective liberation. My PhD was in Sudanese foreign policy and international legitimacy. I have spent time and time again dissecting the modus operandi of the Bashir regime, how it got into power, how it manipulated the international double standards, how it consolidated power every time there was a glimpse of hope for the people, and any time people have collectively come together. This manipulation is to be expected because, and it was said by Kofi Annan the late Kofi Annan, in 2004, when he pointed out that this system, the United Nations, cannot continue with the fate of the world being held by 5 governments, by one word, that is veto. I know it's common to say, and I hope my sister Samah will extend me some grace as we make use and take this invitation to relearn our history and revisit our history. Because when I wrote my PhD and when I was studying it from a lens of an Arab at the time. I was still identifying as an Arab, and this is a whole other story we can get into. But now revisiting it from the lens of Pan-Africanism, Afrocentrism, what is currently unfolding in the land of the Black, and what that means for the global Black Lives Movement, and what that means for the revolution of consciousness storming across the continent and all people of African ancestry, is this realization. By the definition, and I go back to the power of words and the weaponization of words in this now declared International Decade of Indigenous Languages, by definition, a military coup is something that is organized, orchestrated, executed entirely by the military institution of a country. To date, that is not the case in Sudan. And to me, that was very, very surprising, because we consistently see the military. It is what we know to be our history, this military rule. But there is always some agreement behind the scenes. And this is why we must ask more questions. And this is why we need to connect the dots. Because there is some non-military component that is liaising with the military. And we don't need to look too far right now. Who's propping up the military in Sudan right now? And who's propping up the RSF? These questions that we need to ask and contextualize in what they mean on a larger scale on the continent, and what that means with the global politics. With the deal that was happening with Russia to establish a naval base in Port Sudan, and what that does to access to the Red Sea, and what that will do to the Gulf countries' access to whatever they need from Port Sudan, and how that will affect the Gulf allyship to the US in this Ukraine-US war. And where US will stand in terms of NATO, where France's interest is very strictly invested in the gold that is in Darfur. France, the same country that put forth the resolution at the UN to transfer the Darfur case to the ICC, now staying deadly silent, conveniently so, because of what's happening in Darfur, because of its access to the gold, because it needs that gold to back its economy once Francophone Africa makes its flip to a united African currency backed by the gold. This is far too intricate. And it is much bigger than Sudan, and it's not just about Sudan, and we have been saying that. And this is why we say, pay attention to the people and not just the land. Pay attention to what the people are doing and how we have been mobilizing. And what we're trying to ask you to just reflect on. So many people are slipping through the cracks beyond just our own families that we're not able to track. We have refugees. Sudan is home to a massive number of African refugees who have nowhere to go. Some of them who have escaped their government, and now their governments are taking full advantage of this and going and rounding them up, where they will either reintegrate them into their militaries and wars they don't want to fight and have no business fighting, or sentence them to death for the audacity to seek refuge elsewhere for a life of dignity. We can't keep track of all of that. We're doing the best we can. But there's a lot of work to be done here. And so I'm very grateful for the space you are yielding, and for us to see how we can best go about doing that. And I'll anchor here. I'll point out again, hypocrisy. in the power sharing agreement, the facade of a power sharing agreement, in the forced negotiations where they kept telling the civilians to come back to the table and negotiate with the military, when the people kept saying no more military rule, no negotiation with the military, and the outside forces, powers kept forcing that conversation and that so-called negotiation. The justification in that power sharing agreement for the military to be the first round of leadership in this so-called power sharing agreement, the justification there was that the military had the control to secure the borders, had the control to provide safety and security for the people and stability in some sort. They have time and time and time again continued to prove that they are incapable of doing that. And when the coup happened in 2021, we have one glaring example in their face, and it's called Tirs al-Shamal, and it's the organization, the local organizing committee of the North, and how they sealed off the border with Egypt, with anyone trying to take out the produce from Sudan that continues to go and make it to Egypt, where Egyptians can eat happily, and the food basket of the world continues to starve to death. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahmoud. This is extremely powerful. And we fortunately have the time and the desire now in this meeting to hear and to share suggestions of what we as an advocacy group might do. We've heard that the humanitarians have pulled out. We've heard that the internet is down, the communications are down, the roads are closed, the military is everywhere. So we need to hear from this group of experts your suggestions for where we might leverage influence, for how we might share our own understanding, and for what action we might take. So these are serious questions. We try to address this in Ethiopia, we try to address this in DRC, we try to address this in Nigeria. You know, we represent groups working across the continent, and there are themes that you raise that are precisely pertinent to all of these countries. So please advise. And also there will be, please raise your hands, members who are here, for specific questions and suggestions. I see one already. For a strategy for us as a coalition of actors, organizations, faith-based and advocacy groups, and some regional, but mainly broad, to act together with a statement to guide others who might look to us to take particular action that that we would consider based on your advice. So I will call on Albert to ask the first question, but please keep in mind that this time is precious and concentrated to hear you and to deliberate on what you would recommend to us. Albert?
Yes, and then going into the point of what can we do. I know Samah was equally quite active. He called in about almost half an hour before the meeting, and I had a chance to confer with her. And I shared with her the fragility of the space that we've created as AdNA. But what we need are prime movers, and they are wonderful advocates for this specific issue. And there's a process in place to start working with them, I believe. I've added them to the Ubuntu working group, and I thank Muiza for also inviting them here. Most often than not, we feel we are more or less defenseless. I mean, we don't have the capacity because we are counting on much stronger forces to come to our aid. But it starts from us, you know, showing the solidarity, creating enough space to have these conversations, you know. So I did have a chance to work on the Darfur issue at the UN and with the churches, and it was, I felt, one of my opportunities to make some inroads on this specific issue on the Horn of Africa. I would like to extend an invitation to the two of them to also join our Pan-African. I think Mahmoud has already been part of our conversations. so that some of these conversations and events we're having are not held in a vacuum. They are related to concrete things happening on the ground, and each of us can play some specific role. So given what you know so far, what will you recommend as to the next steps we should take, besides giving you the space to share and make this issue as concerning for every person, and more so every African. Thank you for being effective advocates for the situation and the plight of folks in Sudan.
Thank you, Albert. And Angelique has her hand up also before we go to get responses.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I can't thank our Sudanese sisters enough for this amazing moment of sharing. I am profoundly moved. I used to live in Sudan. I lived in Darfur, and I lived in Khartoum. And I was very honored to be there. I was a young married woman at the time, and all the women, quote, behind the veil blessed me and took me behind their veil in confidence, and it transformed my whole life. My daughter is named for Sudan. Her name is Asha. She's just married. And that's how profound it was for me. So I'm very moved by all of this, and by your gifting to come to our Pan-African Working Group meeting the other day. I would like to know specifically, what do you want from us? What is it you have to say about the next steps? It's not just a statement, it's a plan. We need more than a statement. We need a plan of how it is we get the word out. Now, your Pan-African Working Group has already said from Africa Day, we are already together. You have already agreed to bring your voices to that. But we must do more. I know a webinar doesn't sound like much, but maybe that's something else we can do just separately as you plan your week, because I understand you're doing a whole week. We need to fully come alongside with you on that one. And then second of all, we need an advocacy plan. We need to get to the Congressional Black Caucus. We need to get to the people on the Hill. They need to understand what you just said, Dr. Mahmoud. This is not just a Sudan issue. This is a global issue. And your analysis was so precise. It made so much the connections with what it has to do with our lives. And that's what a lot of people don't get. They don't understand that. They don't understand how the Nile intersects with everything. They don't understand how it relates to the Gulf states. Some of us have a clue, but you have the clue. So I just want to urge you to come up with an advocacy plan and how we fully come alongside of you for that Africa Week that we've already said, at least your Pan-African Working Group has said, we will walk with you and we will be together. But just know, and sorry if I sound a little teary-eyed, I really am, because I used to live there. And when I was there, it wasn't quite like that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Angelique. As usual, you hit the heart of the matter and you speak for all of us, and we appreciate your input and your solidarity. Thank you. Pauline, let me call on you before we move.
Yes.
Just draw attention to the clock. It's 12:52. We do want to get to the Pan-African event in New York specifically, but we also need to figure out how we go forward on this matter. Pauline.
Thank you so very much for your passionate appeal and to how you are helping us understand what is happening to our brothers and sisters in Sudan. It's very painful to watch and to listen and to feel so helpless at the same time that we don't have concrete actions that we can take to really make it stop, because the priority is to make it stop so that our people don't suffer anymore. And then in the safety of their homes, then they can work towards democracy in their country. So I don't have any specific things other than to ask you, our sisters, whether you think pushing for sanctions at this time is helpful or it's not helpful. What role do you want to see Africa Union playing? What role do you want to see the European Union playing, the US government, the United Nations? And what specific things are we going to be appealing, not just to policymakers, but also to the public in terms of what really needs to happen to restore peace in Sudan? Some of our organizations have programs in the region, in the Horn of Africa. So we are taking refugees in our Ethiopia program and also in our South Sudan program. But it is not enough. We know that there are people who are stuck in Sudan and are not able to leave, and not everybody can leave. So how do we make sure that those who cannot leave are also protected? Because if we focus too much on evacuating, which is what other governments are doing, what happens to the people who cannot run, who cannot be evacuated? What happens to them? So anyway, I know we don't have much time, but I just feel like we want to write a very strong statement as AdNA. That's one thing that we've been pushing, and we want to really know what we are asking for in that statement for both the policymakers, but also the US public and the other entities that I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. And as I mentioned to both of you before we started, our statements are often looked to by the faith-based communities and others for guidance, rather than just go out, particularly on one issue. And because we're up against a 1 o'clock deadline, I personally would appeal to Albert's suggestion that we think about a task force that you meet with, that meets with others who actually could take up some of these issues in more regular meetings than a monthly meeting, who would step forward to work as a task force for Sudan. And I think that was your recommendation, Albert, and it gives us an off-ramp for channeling the discussion and the recommendation, and create a work group in that way that would be part of AdNA. We have them for the specific areas where people are passionate and equipped to work. It doesn't cover the whole continent, but we try to pick up the themes that are relevant to every other region of the continent, so that the work applies beyond as you say, the geographical boundaries that are referred to, and most people talk about Sudan, and refocus on the population and the people at the heart of those regions. Other suggestions we could entertain, but forming a task force and getting a time for that task force to meet might be one way of moving forward. Who was speaking?
Hi, Bonnie.
Yes, Sadia.
Yes, I know there's not much time. I just wanted to say to our Sudanese sisters that something that really has worked well lately, especially for us Somalis, is Somalis in the diaspora, is using the social media, which I've noticed the Sudanese are really using it, but creating, as Dr. Mahmoud talked about, hashtag that's relevant to the particular sections that they want to bring attention to the attention of those in the prominent sections of the government, especially in the US. So hashtags have really produced the results, and I just wanted to encourage that. And also holding Twitter spaces.
Thank you, Sadia. Others? it seems that we have interest in continuing to work. And I know that Emira, who had to leave us early, had called for Sudan work previously. Muiza?
I was just going to suggest there are some recommendations that they made on the air actually at the end of the show. I wonder if I can entertain them to raise some of those. I think the 5 points that Dr. Mahmoud raised, and Samah Salman as well raised some points as well, which I think we can start thinking about for what to do next.
So are you saying raise them now in this meeting?
Yes, just so that we have them in our minds, and I'm putting them on the spot, but
and putting them into our minutes.
If they don't have them, I'll send the link of the show anyway, and then people should listen to the what I asked for, the what people should do at the end of the show, what people here can do beyond the Sudanese diaspora community, but how can we be in solidarity with the people? So.
Okay, you do have your hand up, Dr. Mahmoud, do you have your hand up already? If you're able to tick those off and put them into the record for our meeting, that's a boon. We do have to, we should decide if we will have another meeting, and someone who is interested in that should suggest a time and place that we would pick up to act on the recommendations that we hear now. Please go ahead.
No, I'm happy to paste these recommendations in the chat to save time. The one thing that I do want to emphasize, in addition to thanking everyone for speaking, is Reverend Dr. Angelique, I really appreciate you sharing that. And that's really all. Humanize Sudan. Humanize Sudan. Share your experiences connected to your human experience. I hate to tell you all to imagine what we're going through, but just humanize it. Connect it to some other experience that you know, and share that experience. And I'll share the rest in the chat presently.
Okay, thank you very much. Is anyone who might serve on a Sudan task force able to suggest a meeting time, if you support that idea?
We could offer them the Zoom meeting facilities and help the outreach could connect with the two of them and Moise.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and then there's there was a Sudanese working group, wasn't there before?
I don't, not in my era.
Not near. Okay. There's
that goes back to 16.
Okay. But I think, yeah, I mean, I can work with Albert, and then we can set up the time of the meeting, and I'll work with our two guests and the three guests actually, and see when we can all come together. Yeah.
That was the same therefore.
When you are doing it soon, please consider that some of us are in the continent.
Oh yeah, time zone. That's right. You have to remember there. Yeah.
Early in the morning. You've been in that position
early in the
plenty
morning,
of times, Musa.
Yes, I empathize with that very much. So we're looking at meetings roughly around 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe that's probably the best time, because then you can you're not crowded with other meetings. I think that's my first suggestion, would be 9 o'clock in the morning.
And those of you who are interested, if you tap on the 3 dots at the bottom of the chat, you can click on Save Chat and take these recommendations with you. Angelique, please.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for the accommodation to speak from the human level, because I don't think a lot of people do, but I think the marriage makes the difference. The human and the advocacy, analytical voice, which all of you do so well. I just want to say that your Pan-African Working Group is already moving on this, and we haven't really been able to share our story yet, but want you to know that space is still open. I would love to be on that group, but it depends on when it meets, and that's when I could be available or not. But please know I am with you, and if I can, I certainly will. My heart is there. My heart and my soul is there. So just let me know.
Okay, thank you so much.